they already understood who they are and, where they want to go as a country. So that was very clear. So even as they interact with the rest of the world, there are things you already know that with China that would not fly, that will not be acceptable. They were able to close themselves out and up and just take care of their business and just take care of the things they needed to take care of. And China today is one of the powerful nations we have in the world. So it is a price that even China had to pay, and it is a price that we must be willing to pay. We must be willing to pay in this continent if we have to see change, if we must see development, from it in our countries, and if we have to see things being done differently. So Macron is in Africa, and he began his 4-nation tour of Africa on the 1st. Amid anti-French sentiment that saw French troops recently leave Mali and Burkina Faso, Macron is set to visit Gabon, Angola, and the Republic of Congo and the Democratic Republic of Congo amid a growing regional opposition to French involvement and support for closer ties with Russia. Days before his departure, Macron announced France will be taking on a more differential relationship with Africa that would require France to assume a profound humility, that's right, in its dealings with the continent. As part of the new strategy, French military bases in Africa will transform into military academies. Why? Why? Do we need any extra? I don't think we need any extra military academy. For instance, here in Kenya, I think we have enough of those that train our men and women. Sometimes we do have our men and women in service, perhaps go out for a few added training and come back. But I don't think coming up, and maybe, I know France is not planning to set up that here, but we wouldn't need it. Why are you setting up military academies? Have these countries told you that they want military academies, France? So what is the difference with you pulling out your troops and then you setting up military academies in this country? Well, others will eventually be co-run with African partners. So France is trying to act like, the way Britain does act. And that's why Britain has committed so much atrocities in the world, but you can hardly hear, not so many times you think even to blame Britain, because it does things in a way that it is involved, but it's not really there. So it uses other people, and that's what that is the strategy it used even during its colonialism days here in the continent. It collaborated. It looked for Africans who were willing to collaborate and help them spread their agenda, and so they used the Africans to work against the fellow Africans. They used the Africans who were willing to be collaborators to carry out the British agenda. So this seems to be the new strategy that France is trying to use to act as if now they are collaborating with these Africans. So this is what he said as he was preparing to come. That France should take a humble pie, and France should operate with profound humility, because France and its agenda is being defeated here, and perhaps the former colonies are asking for, but not in the right manner, are asking for some kind of a different negotiated agreement and relationship that is based on mutual respect and mutual cooperation, and not for you to feel as though you have to be speaking to them in the manner that you do, France. And France's military withdrawal from Africa will allow its former colonies to finally assume full statehood, he added. Okay. But as France has distanced itself from the continent, other parties have moved in. Private Russian military group Wagner has established a presence in Mali and the Central African Republic, where it has been accused. So we know the recent anti-French sentiments, especially from these countries. We know it's quite obvious that this must, part of it, of course, France has, and how it has been dealing with these countries has something to blame on that. But we know they have been motivated by the presence of these Russian mercenary groups. That is not a secret. We already know that. And so I think France has to change. France has to change how it is dealing with its former colonies. And it's true, the strategy that France has been using has not worked. So it better do things differently. And he says he will unveil France's new African strategy, and I think one of them is to withdraw parts of his troop, but instead of completely withdrawing them, and now France is setting up military academies. I don't know what is the difference. I don't know what is the difference, and if at all that will change this anti-French rhetorics. Like we saw in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there was some protest. Was it yesterday? There was some anti-France protest as a French president. He's going there today. He's going to the Democratic Republic of Congo today, and there were already some protests against the civil society groups held protests in the DR Congo's capital, Kinshasa, against a visit by French President Emmanuel Macron that is scheduled, I think, for today. The protesters gathered outside the French embassy to accuse France of siding with neighboring Rwanda, which has been linked by the UN and US of supporting the M23 rebel groups based in the eastern part of the country. Rwanda has repeatedly denied supporting the rebels. President Macron's visit is meant to deepen the Franco-Congolese relationship in the fields of education, health, research, culture, and defense, according to a statement from his office. Mr. Macron is making a four-nation tour of the Central African country, starting with Gabon on Wednesday. So he wants to, according to Macron's office, France wants to deepen the relationship with the Congo in the fields of education, in the fields of health, in the fields of research, in the fields of culture and defense. Of course, this is part of France's foreign policy in Africa, and I think it is quite tailor-made according to how they feel they want to relate to each country. So that is what they intend to do. I'd like to see how this cooperation, like what are some of the things that how France wants to actually cooperate in achieving this, for instance, in education, in health, in research, culture. In culture, what is it? Yeah, and in defense. Of course, these are what you called the, it's part of diplomacy. It's part of diplomacy. So culture also, it's part of the soft diplomacy. Okay, that is quite soft. So you don't. Someone is not coming to you strong-handed, but they slowly get into the things and your social and way of life, and before you know it, they have they sort of they have an influence in how you do some of these things. So this is just part of their foreign policy, and this is just part of how they intend to explore diplomacy in the name of research, in the name of culture, in the name of defense, and all these other things camouflaged as that. But that is the wider part of France's foreign policy and how it plans to change its approach here in the different countries that it feels as though its interests are being threatened. So even as we speak about the Democratic Republic of Congo, all right, so there is a story I read us yesterday, but I did not get time to talk about it. So now I want us to talk about it, and that is a suggestion by some members of parliament. A section of members of parliament from the conflict-hit North Kivu province in the Democratic Republic of Congo want President Felix Tshisekedi to consider engaging the M23 rebel group. In an open letter, the MP said a peaceful settlement would de-escalate the ongoing conflict in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo that has displaced hundreds of thousands in the past year. The legislators have demanded to be involved in peace initiatives seeking to resolve the security crisis in the region. They want humanitarian corridors and roads blocked in areas affected by conflict be opened. In recent weeks, the M23 has captured villages and towns as they attempt to advance towards the regional capital in Goma. The group was scheduled to commence withdrawal from positions they occupied in recent offensive beginning Tuesday for a period of 1 month. It is not clear if the rebels, of course, they have not complied. They have not complied, and the M23 has engaged government forces in heavy fighting for most of February. A UN panel of experts say the M23 is supported by Rwanda, something which Kigali has continued to deny. But that is not the story. The story is that some members of parliament from North Kivu province are now urging the government and President Felix Tshisekedi to consider having a conversation with the M23 rebel group. And I support these sentiments because we've seen these mediation processes, because there are a number of them. There has been a number of mediation processes that have been ongoing, all related to this conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And one of which that is led by our former president, Uhuru Kenyatta, was between the government forces and also some of the rebel groups that were acceptable, according to the government of the DRC, to be part of the mediation, and they were acceptable to, to join the table, the mediating table, of which a good number of them even traveled here in Nairobi. And there were some agreements that were signed and all that. But one of the key rebels that is considered the main problem, that is the M23, according to President Felix Tshisekedi, he said this rebel group is not acceptable, will not be allowed to come to the mediation table. And now, another mediation that is being led by João Lourenço, the president of Angola, also between, I think this is between the presidents, the two presidents of Democratic Republic of Congo and the president of Rwanda. And they are talking there, and also there's a resolution that was made, the last of that engagement, that demanded for M23 to move, that gave an ultimatum and agreed on a date and all that. So you are having all these things and talking about this group and discussing matters around it and signing agreements on matters around this group. And yet this group is not allowed to come to the table and air their grievances and give their part of the account. The government of the Democratic Republic of Congo has been adamant. They do not want the M23 on the table. And I think at this point, I would support having, initially I was a bit hesitant, because you can't come to my home and then put my life in danger, destroy my things, violate my personal space, and still make some certain demands and expect for me to respect that. That was my initial thinking. But as the conflict has evolved and we've been able to see details and how this conflict has been developing, and this has been part of, a developing democracy, not democracy, but diplomacy, because today it's one thing, the next day is another thing. And as issues and different issues and actors, have continued to speak on this matter and the development of this conflict, I think now it is important for us to have M23 on the table. Different actors, different countries, different people have tried having President Tshisekedi and Kagame in the same place, but they will not. There has been a game of cat and mouse, especially with the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. President Tshisekedi has not been very keen in having a one-on-one and talking with President Paul Kagame. And President Paul Kagame on the other side has also been saying, you must treat your people right. That is because according to what he's been, from the sentiments and what he's been saying, it's like the local Tutsi community in the DRC are being targeted. And so that has been something that Paul Kagame has come out clearly. Even last week, I was talking to you about what he said in an interview he did with the East African. And, so there has been an issue where they have been avoiding each other, but particularly not Paul Tshisekedi, but Felix Tshisekedi, the president of the DRC, has been playing an avoidance game here. And Paul Kagame essentially said the reason why President Tshisekedi might not be wanting this conflict to end is because he does not want to have elections this year. That is what Paul Kagame, president of Rwanda, said sometimes back last year. I can't remember exactly when. And what was I telling you here on Monday? Was it on last week? Yeah. Last week there were reports, according to the government now, they're saying if this conflict persists the way it is persisting, then there will be a challenge as far as carrying out an election is concerned. So I don't know if it's carrying out an election in the area that is affected or carrying out an election period in the whole of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So Paul Kagame, where he's seated right now, is saying, see, I told you, this person does not want to have an election. This person is not interested in ending this conflict because he wants to stay here and he does not want to have an election, because that is what President Paul Kagame had said the other time. And on top of that, he added, President Tshisekedi was not even duly elected. So he questioned President Tshisekedi's credibility as the president of DRC, which I think he overstepped his boundary, being that he's the head of state of states in Rwanda. These are not sentiments you make. The election process in DRC happened whichever way it happened. The Electoral Commission announced whichever person they announced as another head of state of another country. It is not within your purview to decide if the leader of that country was legitimately elected or not. That is not your place. So Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, I felt he overstepped that. And that showed you maybe to what levels this conflict has become personal among these two leaders. So there is a game that is being played there. And there is now that when you look at what is going on, why would the DR government not want to have M23? I understand your position. They've taken over huge parts of the country, in that side of the country, and they've done this and the other. And you could be within your rights to say we don't want them on the table, and there are conditions that you gave for you to want to meet up with them, and that one of them was to move from the places that they had taken over, and also I think that was the key. That was the key, and also cessation of hostilities, the two conditions that you had given, and I think none of which have been respected. So the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo also could be within its rights to say, because these two conditions have not been met, now therefore we refuse to meet with the M23 rebel group. But the members of parliament from North Kivu are saying enough is enough. If everybody is taking these strong positions and nobody wants to cede the ground, and the people continue to suffer, I mean, something must give. If we really want to find peace and tranquility and end this conflict, then something must give. So perhaps it's about time the President, Felix Tshisekedi, considered engaging with M23 rebels. There is an engagement that took place. I was shocked because it was kept under wraps sometimes back last year. Was it around November, I think? Between the forces of Democratic Republic of Congo, between MINUSCA, that is the UN mission in Democratic Republic of Congo, between the EAC forces and representatives and another body from the UN. And that meeting was secretive, and the M23. And the government of Congo did not even speak about it. It is M23 that came out to tell us that they had a meeting, and the government of the DRC was also represented in that meeting. But the DRC did not even comment on it, did not make it public, so you wonder, what is really going on? What are we not being told? President Tshisekedi, are you serious? I know we've really been putting our attention to President Paul Kagame and all these accusations and all these allegations and what the UN is saying and what the US is saying and what France has been saying, all in they are condemning Rwanda and its support for M23. But the same effort and spotlight has not been given to President Felix Tshisekedi, and see what part does the Democratic Republic of Congo play in fueling this conflict. I think if we are serious about ending this war, then everybody should be held accountable. There has been allegations that the government of the DRC is supporting another rebel group in fighting the M23. And the government of the DRC has never commented on this matter. So sometimes when such a hefty issue and allegations are made and you're quiet, people would assume, and people will be left to assume whichever way they feel they want to assume, So I think questions must be asked to the Democratic Republic of Congo's leadership and tell us their commitment on ending this war. And also Rwanda, as much as President Paul Kagame has been insistent that Rwanda has no role in that it is playing in supporting this rebel group. But every time he opens his mouth to speak, he contradicts himself. When you just hear what he's saying, you can just read between the lines and you can see. I think the other day I was just sharing with you that interview that he had, and from what he was saying, it's like, the minute the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo decided not to protect his civilians, he crossed the red line and things like this. So if he crossed the red line, so who is now reprimanding President of Congo, the government, from after crossing the red line? So it's just some of these things that if you read through and hear what he's saying without saying it in the exact words, then you can see and understand perhaps the position of Rwanda and maybe the role it is playing in this conflict. So I think that I support this position by these members of parliament because these hardline positions are not helping anybody. We are not moving forward. So it is time that President Felix Tshisekedi was considered meeting with M23 or having M23 have demanded to speak to the president directly. And he has refused. So I think them and this renewed fighting that started again over the weekend is just their way of getting the attention and putting pressure on the government of the DRC to have a conversation with them. Is that the right way to do it? Of course not. And, that might not prompt the government of DRC to want to speak to them, because it hasn't anyway. That strategy hasn't worked. So I think both the government and M23, as much as these MPs are asking, they're not demanding, they're asking for the president to consider having a conversation with M23. Also, M23 should stop with these attacks. M23 should retreat, for instance. Let them retreat as one of the conditions. Let them stop, with the confrontations. And then say we have the ceasefire, we've retreated back, we have respected that agreement. Now, can we talk and create also an environment for a conversation, because if M23 continues to hold its ground, the government of Congo continues to hold its ground. In the meantime, the people suffer, because the people are the ones who are suffering. And then nobody's winning here. Nobody's winning here. So I think, yes, the President Felix Tshisekedi needs to consider having a conversation with M23. So the legislators have demanded to be involved in peace initiatives. They're saying, as much as we're having all these outsiders coming in and being part of the peace process. And that will be the EAC, that will be other actors. But it is important even for us as leaders to be involved in this peace initiative, which I support, because we can't want this peace process to work more than the people of Congolese want this process to work. And when they come in and they play a role and they're part of that process, they will own this process. So when the rest of the actors do their work and leave, you will have people in there that are part of this process that understand what's going on, and we will continue, because this is a process. It's not something that an event you do and you're done and that's it. This is a process that will go on for so many years. So I support their demand for them to be involved in this initiative, which I think is important, because for there to truly be peace, outside of the many external factors that have contributed to this conflict, we know there are numerous internal factors also. So if we have internal players that are strongly in support of this initiative and are really involved, then maybe we can have peace and stability in the DRC. So we have a solution that majorly comes, and ideas that majorly comes from the people of the Democratic Republic of Congo, who understand the genesis of these problems, and perhaps who could suggest important pointers as far as ways in finding peace is concerned within the local context and the community, the larger community of the Democratic Republic of Congo. So yes, these leaders in the DRC should be involved outside of the top leadership that I'm beginning to think could be having different motives in why they choose to handle this conflict and the approach they're taking. So we need to have other leaders trickle down to the grassroots who should be part of this process, so that we are able to move forward and we're able to hear from different people, different positions, because this is becoming, well, it's not becoming, or it's not going to be, it is already out of hand. So whichever way we can find a solution, I think that means should be explored at this point. So I support this position. And President Felix Tshisekedi, it's about time that you put your ego aside, put your feelings aside. The personal problem that you have with President Paul Kagame, let's put that aside and let's look at the bigger picture, and that is the people who are suffering and the country that you dearly love, okay? And see how best can you end this conflict as the leader of DRC, all right? And elections need to happen. If those elections are postponed, that could be also a source for another conflict and continued conflict. But then again, how are you going to have a conflict, an election in a space, especially the North Kivu? It's a huge area that has been affected with this conflict. That might mean only one side of the country will go to its elections, which also is not going to be fair. So let's create conditions that are necessary, that will be enabling even for an election to take place. And let's stop dragging these issues because of some personal things. Yeah, let's have these talks. Let's move forward, and let's have elections by the end of this year. And that can only happen if the country is stable. So can we work on the stability of Congo, President Felix Tshisekedi? Give your commitment to that. Okay, all right. Thank you, and thank you so much for your time and for watching. I'll see you later at 3 p.m. East African time for more news from across the continent of Africa. Thank you so much, and bye-bye for now.